Hey everyone, Ray here with Rinksworks. Someone brought me this 94 Chevy full-size truck. It's got a battery light on the dash. So this is got a 5.7 liter or 350 for those of us that are older. And we're going to figure out why that battery light's on and we're going to fix it. So stay tuned and I'll show you how we're going to do that. Let's get started. All right, we're in the truck now. I'm going to fire it up and we'll see what's actually happening here. So you can see the battery light is on. Also, if you look at the voltmeter there, showing about 11 volts. That should be up over 14. So let's pop the hood and figure out what's happening. All right, let's take a look here. All right, there's the battery, which actually looks like it's too small for this truck. And here's the alternator. Yay, it's up top, easy to get to. All right, that's a good thing. I suspect this is our problem, but we're going to diagnose it to verify that. So let me get a multimeter and show you how we're going to troubleshoot. All right, first thing we're going to do is we're going to check the actual battery voltage. So I'm going to set my meter on DC volts. If you have a different kind of meter that has voltage ranges on it, usually those have a range on them that says 20 volts. That's the one you'd want to pick. You want to pick anything above 15 or so. So this is, I got the side post, so I just put a couple alligator clips on the end of my leads, and you can see my voltage is 12.3. There's a segment issue with my meter, but that's okay. Your perfect voltage would be 12.6, so this is a little low, but it doesn't necessarily mean the battery's bad. It could be that it's not being charged from the alternator. So I'm gonna grab the keys real quick and we're gonna talk about the next step. Okay, I'm gonna start the truck. We should see that voltage jump up to anywhere between about 14.2 and 14.7 volts, and that would be what the alternator is putting out to charge the battery. So I'm gonna start it up and we'll keep an eye on that meter. All right, so you can see what's happened. Appears that the alternator is not charging. We're right at 12 volts. So let's start looking at diagnosing the alternator. We should be at 14.2 to 14.7 right there. All right, what I'm going to actually do while this is running, I'm going to go turn on the headlights and the blower motor and the radio and try to get as many accessories as I can running to see if this drops. I suspect it will. I actually don't even think the alternator is working at all, but we're going to do that just to see what happens. So there's the lights on, and okay, blower motor's on. Took me a minute. And now we're at 11.7, so that's really just drawing from the battery. The alternator is not charging, so let's start troubleshooting that. I did want to show you one thing first. So the truck's running. You see our voltage right now is 11.99. We started at 12.33, I think, I'm gonna kill the truck, and if the alternator was charging, it would bring the battery up above that 12.33 by now. And as you can see, we're down to 12.17, 12.2 basically. So it's pretty clear that the alternator is not charging. I think the battery's pretty strong because the headlights look good when it's running, and I do think the battery's strong. However, customers asking me to replace it just because it's already 5 years old, and it should be a little bit larger, physically larger battery in it. So probably going to do that as well. Okay, now even though I suspect that this alternator is not working, there's a few things to check before you just go buy a new one. And that is that all your terminals are secure on your battery, and that they're not corroded or dirty, which these are in pretty good shape. A lot of times, of course, your battery posts will be up top, and you can pull those off, clean them up with a wire brush, whatever you need to do, and get those good and clean. And the other thing you want to look at is on the alternator itself. You want to make sure that your wiring connections are on there, that they're good. You don't see any corrosion or anything. This one looks like it's in good shape. I pulled this rubber piece back off. This is the one that goes right to the battery. And you want to make sure that that connection is not loose and that it's not corroded or dirty. So this all looks pretty good. Now we're going to do a couple more tests. We're going to just check for voltage drops to see if we have a ground problem or if we have an issue between the battery itself and the B+ post. All right, we're going to check one more thing before we pull this alternator off. The other thing I forgot to mention is, you're looking at your wiring and all that, make sure that all that's good. Also, make sure your alternator is spinning and that the belt is tight. Now, this is a serpentine belt, so it's going to be, really, you don't have to adjust this type, but make sure your belt's tight, the thing's spinning, and it's not making a bunch of racket too, because sometimes the bearings will go out in the alternator. So what we're going to do now, though, is we're going to check for voltage drops from the negative and from the positive to make sure that we actually have a good ground between the two, and that we have good connection between the battery post and the battery. That's the B+ post on some alternators, is how it's marked. So what I'm going to do is I've got the negative lead on the negative of the battery. I have my meter set up to millivolts. You could still use the voltage. You could do either one. What we're looking for is less than 0.1 volt or 100 millivolts with the engine running and a load on it. So I'm going to stop the camera for a second. I'm going to turn the lights on, the fan, radio, all the stuff, and start the truck. And then we're going to take the positive lead and we're going to touch it to the case of the alternator. Now be careful, this is spinning, so you don't want to, you got to be very careful. But we're going to go like to here, and then we're going to look at our voltage reading. Less than 0.1 or 100 millivolts is what we want. Don't pay attention to what you just saw there. That's just nothing. So I'm going to start it up, and then we'll test it. Okay, now we're running. I put it back on the voltage scale just to show you. You want to test this at about 1500 RPM, so I just attached the coat hanger wire to the throttle cable so I could raise the RPMs up. I already did this off camera because I can't do everything at once holding the camera like I am, so I'm not going to up the RPMs for this test this time because I've already done it. I have the lights, fan, all that stuff is on. So again, we're looking for less than 0.1 volt. I'm going to touch this in here, staying away from that fan. And we have 0.004 volts. We want less than 0.1, which we're way less than. So we're fine here. That means we have a good ground. We're getting good ground to the battery. Now, if that was above 0.1, the next thing you'd want to do is go to your bracket and check your bracket. I'm going to have the same result, of course. But if you had less than 0.1 here, but higher on the alternator, you'd want to pull the alternator off and clean off all those physical connections between the alternator and the bracket. Now if you're doing it at the bracket and you still have above, you had above 0.1, then you'd want to go right to the engine block somewhere and touch that. And then ultimately you'd want to find your ground itself from the battery cable. If the bracket was above and then you check the block and it was okay, then you'd want to take the bracket off and clean all the physical contacts between the bracket and the engine block. So in this case we're good from the negative of the battery to the alternator. Now we're going to test for voltage drop from the positive to the B plus post. So I'm going to set up and then I'll bring you back. Oh, I'll show you when I go on the millivolt scale. I have 4.5 millivolts. Again, we wanted to be less than 100 millivolts. So we're good. Okay, here's our last test. This time we're going to be testing for voltage drop between the positive of the battery and the B plus post on the alternator. This time we're going to be looking for less than 0.3 volts or 300 millivolts. Same thing. I've got my meter set on millivolt scale because it's easier to read. I could be on this other one and I'd just be looking for less than 0.3. Again, you want to do that with all your accessories on and about 1500 RPM. I did this again off camera because I couldn't do it all at the same time holding the camera. But if you watch, what we're doing is first we're going to check directly to the post, and if there was a drop, if we see above 0.3 drop, then we're going to check to the nut, and if that went away, then if there's a difference between that and the nut, then you'd want to take that nut off, clean up all the threads, and then that would hopefully fix your problem. If that still was high after that, you would check right at the lug right there, and then if that showed a difference between the lug and the post, you'd want to just clean all that up and make sure everything was okay. Now in my case, I'm going to go ahead and put this onto that post, being careful not to touch anything. And you can see I have 1.7 millivolts. So I'm well below 100 millivolts. So I'm good there. So that just basically tested my cable from the B plus post to the battery. So now I'm at the point we're going to pull this alternator out because it's not charging the battery. So by doing those tests, I verified that the alternator was not charging and that the cause of it not charging the battery was not a wiring issue. So now I know my wiring is good, and the only thing left is the alternator. So I'm going to get set up now and we'll pull it off. Alright, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to disconnect the negative of the battery, but I want to show you something here. Sort of a safety thing here. This post, this lead goes right to the battery. We've already proven that has in the way we were testing it. And of course, the alternator body is ground itself. So you got to be really careful when you're messing with this post. Even, even when this cover is on here, I had a little bit of force to get that off. You never want to do that with a screwdriver or something, because if you touch that screwdriver to the post and then to the body of the alternator, it's going to go pop. So first thing, we'll disconnect that negative of the battery. So this happens to be an 8mm socket I'm using to disconnect this post. I'm just having the meter on there just so you can see that once I remove this, the danger goes away from the alternator, even if your positive is still connected. So now there should be no voltage there. Alright, now we can get the alternator out. Okay, this truck has a serpentine belt. This is your tensioner system right here. This and this. The belt runs right below this, and this is keeping tension on it for it to go through all its other places. So I'm going to get a 16mm socket, put it on here, go counterclockwise with it. That'll remove the tension, and then I can slip the belt right off. Alright, let's hook our breaker bar down in here. And then we're just going to move that enough to slip the belt off. show you what I'm doing here with this bungee. Sorry about all the movement. So I just used a bungee cord just to keep the keep some tension on this belt, just so it doesn't fall and I have to reroute the whole thing. So that's all I'm doing with that. Now we can pull off the alternator from the brackets. We're going to remove that first, and the wiring harness. I'll take that off. Okay, I have a screwdriver just kind of wedged in there. You just got to kind of lift that clip out of there, then you can pull this like that. Okay, let's remove the battery stud terminal here. This is a 10 millimeter. Now we've got a mounting bolt here, a mounting bolt here, and then one down here in the front. And this one here is a 15 millimeter. And that other one, the other two actually are 13 millimeters. Okay. And then there's one more right here. And now the alternator should pull right out. All right, I got the new alternator. This here is a really tight fit. There's like a bushing here, and it's meant to have a tight fit. So I'm going to probably fight with that a little bit, but we're going to get that part in first, hopefully. And it might be a little bit of a squeeze to get it in. You can see I'm having to kind of work it down in there. Now I'm not normally going to be a fan of hammering on something like this, but I'm just using a soft mallet. I'm just going to try to tap it down in. Down into the thing there. And then we're going to have to just keep kind of messing with it till we get that bolt started. Getting close. Okay, there we go. Okay, now I can get the other two bolts started and then tighten them all up. Let's get this other one in the back in. Alright, I'm going to get an inspection mirror. I can't see back in there, so I'm going to stop the camera for a minute. Okay, I was having trouble because this bottom bracket over on this side was hitting the top right here and not going all the way down. I didn't realize that, but now that it is lined up, just get these last two bolts started, and then we'll tighten everything up. There we go. Okay. Everything started. Now I'm just going to tighten everything up. Okay. There's all the bolts tight. Now we'll put our wire on. Battery is still disconnected. Okay, and connect our wiring harness. Snapped in good. Okay, so I still have my belt here pulled tight with the bungee. So what we're going to now do is take the bungee off of here. Take the bungee off of here. Okay. Now, I'm just going to adjust that up. And there we are. Alternator's in. Okay, let's hook up the battery. Okay, if you saw me when I was coaxing this into place here, something flew off. It was just insert out of the hammer. Now, again, I'm not a fan of whacking on this thing to get it into place, but we were just giving it a little help. Don't use a metal hammer to hit something like this. This is just a soft hammer to just give it a little bit of help. All right, let's hook the battery up. All right, let's hook up the battery. Already hooked up the positive side. Now, I did replace this battery, even though the other one was just fine electrically. But the customer wanted a new battery because it was 5 years old, and that's probably a wise decision nowadays. That's probably about the life of a battery anymore. And it was physically a little bit smaller than the one that's supposed to be in this truck. So, new battery, new alternator. Let's fire it up, see if our light goes away, and we'll see if the alternator is working. All right, first things first, this is a factory battery, factory charged battery. Remember I said 12.6 volts was about what a battery should be when it's fully charged. Let's see what this one is. And it is 12.62 volts. All right, let's go start it up. We'll see if our battery light is gone. Okay, I'm going to fire it up now. Now remember, the battery light is up there in the corner, right there. And it should be off now. And remember, another thing is, just because your battery light is on does not mean it's your battery. Usually it means because the battery's not being charged. All right, let's fire it. Okay, battery light's gone. Now look at our voltage, 14. Again, that voltage is being checked at the battery, but it's high because the alternator is putting out 14 volts. Now let's go prove that. I proved that the alternator is working. Alright, so at the beginning we said when the vehicle's running, it should be between about 14.2 and 14.7 volts. Let's see what we got. 14.6. So the alternator is working, unlike that segment in my meter. Anyway, that is 14.6 volts. So our alternator is now charging. We fixed it. Alright guys, I'm going to leave this one here. I hope that you got something out of it. I hope you learned a little bit about how your charging system works and how to troubleshoot and test it and replace your alternator. Some vehicles is not as easy as this one was. This one's pretty easy to change because it's up top. Some of them are kind of buried down in there, but the principle is pretty much the same on all vehicles. So I hope you got something out of it. And if you did, please hit the like button. Feel free to leave comments if it helped you out. And subscribe if you'd like. Anyway, appreciate it. Thank you, and we'll see you on the next one.